Appalachia doesn't hide its ruins. It just buries them in kudzu. You drive these mountain roads, and the forest presses in from both sides, close enough to touch from the window. Somewhere in those trees, behind the rhododendron, behind the poison ivy, and under 100 years of growth, is a place that used to be on the map. It used to have a name. It used to have a store, a school, a church, and a couple hundred people who got up every morning and went underground to pull coal out of a mountain that did not particularly want to give it up. That's most of the story in Appalachia. The mountain gives something up. People come for it. The mountain runs out. People leave. The forest takes everything back so completely that 20 years later you can drive past the spot and never know anything was there at all. These are 14 of those places. Some are inside national parks and still getting rediscovered. Some are underwater. Some are standing exactly as they were left, in the middle of a forest that has been quietly working on them since before you were born. We're counting down. Number 14, Elkmont, Tennessee. 8 miles from Gatlinburg, inside the most visited national park in the United States, there is a ghost town that 13 million annual visitors drive right past on their way to somewhere else. Elkmont started as a logging town in 1908 when the Little River Lumber Company carved a railroad into the upper Little River Valley to strip the old-growth forest off these mountains. By 1918, it was the second largest town in Sevier County with 1,500 residents, a hotel, a commissary, a machine shop, and a single rail line carrying timber down to the sawmill in Tuckaleechee Cove. Then, the trees ran out. The lumber company sold what was left to wealthy Knoxville businessmen who built a vacation community, the Appalachian Club and the Wonderland Club, with cottages, a clubhouse, dances, parties, and a railroad that brought them up from the city on weekends. For 30 years, the Tennessee elite summered in a town that had just finished being stripped of everything that made it a place. When the Great Smoky Mountains National Park was established in 1934, the cottage owners negotiated lifetime leases. The last resident didn't leave until 2001. When the leases expired and the Park Service finally took ownership of roughly 70 historic buildings with no one left to maintain them, the structures started their slow collapse back into the forest. The Wonderland Hotel, which had survived logging, the Depression, and 40 years of park boundary disputes, collapsed under its own weight in 2005. It was demolished in 2006. Today, 19 buildings have been preserved, including the Appalachian Clubhouse and a handful of the original Knoxville cottages, their porch posts listing slightly, their window glass long gone, their interiors open to whoever walks the trail past them. 13 million people visit this park every year. Most of them never find Elkmont. The ones who do find a row of empty cottages in the trees, the chimneys of demolished buildings rising out of the forest floor, and the very particular silence of a place that used to be a party. Number 13, Blue Heron, Kentucky. Blue Heron sits along Kentucky's Big South Fork River, and it is one of the few abandoned Appalachian coal towns where you can walk through the buildings, or at least through what replaced them. The Stearns Coal and Lumber Company established Mine 18 here in 1937. The company built a full company town on the riverbank and ran it until 1962, when the mine stopped turning a profit and the company walked away. The families who lived here, miners, their wives, their children, the teachers and store clerks, and whoever else the mine needed to function, had about as much say in the matter as the coal seam itself. By the time the National Park Service arrived, the original buildings had rotted away completely. Instead of reconstructing them, the National Park Service made an unusual decision. They built open steel frames in the shape and footprint of the original structures, set the frames where the buildings once stood, and filled them with photographs and recordings of the people who lived there. Miners' voices and children describing what it was like to grow up in a place that existed entirely to serve a single underground operation. Walk through Blue Heron today, and you are walking through ghost buildings, the exact size and shape of what was there, with nothing inside but the shape of the air where the rooms used to be. You can stand in the frame of someone's kitchen and listen to their recorded voice describe making breakfast on a November morning in 1955. Whether that is more or less haunting than actual ruins is a question worth sitting with on the drive back out. Number 12. Nuttallburg, West Virginia. Nuttallburg is what happens when a coal town gets lucky twice. Once when the coal seam turns out to be extraordinary, and once when the right people decide it is worth saving. John Nuttall, an English-born entrepreneur, bought land in the new River Gorge in 1870 and started building infrastructure before the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway even arrived. When the railroad came through in 1873, he was ready. Nuttallburg became the second coal town on the New River to ship what miners called smokeless coal, a bituminous coal that burned so cleanly it became a premium product, the kind that industrial cities and naval ships specifically requested. The town grew to over 100 houses, several schools, and segregated churches on either side of the creek. There were 80 coke ovens processing coal into the fuel that fed the steel mills. In the 1920s, Henry Ford leased the entire operation in his attempt to control every step of his manufacturing supply chain, from the coal that fired his factories to the cars that came out of them. He modernized the facilities, renamed the mine the Fordson Coal Company, and then sold it in 1928 when he could not get control of the railroad that moved the product. The mine closed for good in 1958. The post office closed the same year. The Nuttall family held onto the land for another 40 years before transferring it to the National Park Service in 1998. In 2011, after a multi-year stabilization project, the site opened to visitors. What you find now is the most intact coal mining complex in West Virginia. The head house, the towering conveyor that dropped coal 500 feet from the mine entrance to the railroad below, the coke ovens standing along the creek, and the foundations of the houses, the black school, and the church. The steel of the conveyor is still maroon-colored, which makes the forest around it a specific shade of rust against green. No graffiti, no vandalism, just the machinery that has not run since 1958, surrounded by a gorge that looks more or less the same as it did when John Nuttall first walked in and decided this was the place. Number 11, Thurmond, West Virginia. Thurmond is the least populous incorporated municipality in West Virginia, with a current population of approximately 5 people. It is still a real town. It still has a mayor. In 2005, when the population was 7, 6 of the 7 residents ran for elected office. At its peak in the 1920s, Thurmond generated more freight revenue for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway than Cincinnati, Ohio. More coal ran through Thurmond than through almost any other point on the line. The town's banks were the richest in West Virginia. 15 passenger trains a day stopped at the depot. The hotel served 95,000 passengers a year. It was also, depending on who was describing it, one of the most dangerous places in the American South. A local preacher once said the only difference between hell and Thurmond was that a river ran through Thurmond. A dead man found floating in the New River was fined for carrying an illegal weapon. The fine was paid from his pockets, and he was buried in the Potter's Field. The 100-room Dunglin Hotel, across the river from the main commercial strip, holds what is allegedly the world record for the longest continuous poker game, 14 years running without interruption from 1912 to 1926. The Dunglin burned down in 1930. The diesel locomotive arrived and freed trains from needing coal and water stops. The mines played out. The road came in 1921. Before that, Thurmond was only accessible by rail, but the road came too late to save anything. Today, Thurmond's main street is a row of commercial buildings facing directly onto the active CSX rail line with no intervening street. The depot, built in 1904 and restored by the Park Service in 1995, is a visitor center and an Amtrak flag stop. 3 times a week, the Cardinal train from Chicago to New York City stops here on request in a town of 5 people on the same tracks where 95,000 passengers a year once moved through. The storefronts have been preserved. Behind most of their facades, there is nothing but weeds. Number 10. Lost Cove, North Carolina. Lost Cove sits on top of Flat Top Mountain in Yancey County, North Carolina, accessible only by a 7-mile hike through the Pisgah National Forest. It is genuinely difficult to reach. The trail crosses the Nolichucky River, climbs 800 feet, and drops you into a narrow cove that the mountains have been hiding since before the first white settlers arrived. From 1864 to 1957, nearly a century, a community lived here. At its peak in the 1920s, roughly 100 people farmed this cove, traded with the outside world via the railroad in the gorge below, and built enough of a life that several families stayed for multiple generations. After 1910, when the railroad arrived, the cove also became one of the most productive moonshine operations in western North Carolina. Its position on the Yancey-Mitchell County line made it nearly impossible for tax collectors to establish jurisdiction, which the residents found enormously useful. The last family left in 1957. What they left behind is what 7 miles of hiking earns you: a handful of derelict homes, stone chimney stacks standing in the trees, without the walls that used to surround them, rusted farm tools where the fields were, moss-covered headstones in a clearing that used to be a churchyard. The Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy purchased the core of Lost Cove in 2012, and again in 2025, protecting it from development and ensuring that the access trail remains open. The land will eventually be absorbed into the Pisgah National Forest. The trail is still a 7-mile hike in. There is no shorter way to get there. The mountains made sure of that a long time ago. Number 9. Kaymoor, West Virginia. Kaymoor is what the new River Gorge does to places that forgot to make friends with the right people before they ran out of coal. Founded in 1900 by the Lowmore Iron Company, Kaymoor was a fully integrated coal operation with mine, processing, and coke production all on the same site. It was connected to the railroad below by a steep incline railway that lowered coal down the gorge face. At its peak, Kaymoor occupied both the top and bottom of the gorge, with housing, schools, a company store, and a workforce that was majority black in the early census years. Carter G. Woodson, the historian who established Black History Month, worked in these mines with his brother before he went to college. Workers were paid in scrip, a company-issued currency that could only be spent at the company store. Federal law has since banned the practice. Kaymoor's scrip is now a collector's item. The mines closed in 1962. The town decayed for decades before the Park Service took over. Getting to Kaymoor Bottom now requires descending over 800 stairs, a staircase built by the Park Service specifically for visitors. Each step takes you deeper into the gorge, past mine entrances and coke oven ruins, and past the sign that still reads in the original lettering, "Your family wants you to work safely." A lot of families are still waiting. Number 8. Matewan, West Virginia. Matewan is not fully abandoned. It has a downtown, a diner, a stoplight, and around 500 people. We're including it anyway. On May 19, 1920, the town of Matewan became the site of one of the most violent labor confrontations in American history. The Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, hired by the Stone Mountain Coal Company to evict striking miners from company housing, arrived in Matewan to carry out the evictions. The town's chief of police, Sid Hatfield, refused to let them. An argument on the street escalated into a shooting. When it was over, 2 miners, 7 Baldwin Felts agents, and the mayor of Matewan were dead. What followed was not justice, but escalation. Sid Hatfield was acquitted and immediately became a hero to the Union movement across southern West Virginia. A year later, on the steps of the McDowell County courthouse, Baldwin Felts agents shot him dead in front of his wife. 3 months after that, 10,000 armed miners marched on Logan County in what became the Battle of Blair Mountain, the largest armed labor uprising in American history. Put down by the U.S. Army and Army Air Service aircraft dropping bombs on American workers. The miners lost. The Union did not come to southern West Virginia until the 1930s. Matewan's downtown is a historic district now. The Matewan National Historic Site preserves the street where the shooting happened. The site marker lists the dead. The diner serves biscuits. The new river does not look like the same river that carried the weight of all that and kept moving, but it is. Number 7. The Hawk's Nest Tunnel at Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. This one is not a ghost town. It is the site of the worst industrial disaster in American history, and it is almost completely unknown outside of West Virginia. Between 1930 and 1931, Union Carbide contracted the construction of a hydroelectric tunnel through Gauley Mountain. The workforce was predominantly black men from the South, brought in specifically for this job. The tunnel passed through nearly pure silica rock, and the silica dust they breathed in those tunnels, inadequately ventilated, with no masks provided or required, crystallized in their lungs within months. Workers began dying in 1930. By the time the tunnel was finished, between 476 and 1,000 men were dead of acute silicosis. The estimates vary widely because the bodies of many black workers were buried in unmarked graves in a field in Fayette County, and the company kept no complete records. A congressional hearing in 1936 called it a catastrophe. The company paid settlements that averaged a few $100s per dead worker and admitted no liability. The tunnel is still operational. It carries water from Hawk's Nest Lake to a power station downstream. You can see it from the overlook above the new River Gorge. There is a small museum in Ansted. The field where an unknown number of men were buried has no marker. The tunnel still runs. The water still moves through it. Downriver, the power still flows. Number 6, Proctor, North Carolina. Proctor sat in Hazel Creek Valley in what is now Great Smoky Mountains National Park, one of the most remote and beautiful valleys in the southern Appalachians. The community had been there since the early 1800s, farming and logging and building the kind of multi-generational settlement that defines the older parts of Appalachian culture. In the early 1940s, the Aluminum Company of America needed water. The Fontana Dam project on the Little Tennessee River required the evacuation of 5 mountain communities, including Proctor. The government bought out the residents, closed the roads into Hazel Creek, and flooded the valley floor. What had been farms and fields became the bottom of Fontana Lake. What was above the floodline, the village of Proctor itself on the hillside above the water, was left standing. The government promised a road would be built to give former residents access to the cemeteries where their families were buried. The road was never built. The Proctor town site is accessible, now only by boat across Fontana Lake, then by trail up the hillside. The old church still stands in the trees. The Calhoun House, a 2-story structure built in 1900, is still there. Former residents and their descendants have been coming back by boat for 80 years to maintain the graves of people who never got the road the government promised them. The road is still not built. Davis sits at nearly 3,000 feet in the Allegheny Mountains of Tucker County, and it was built on the assumption that the timber would last forever, which it never does. The town was founded in 1884 by Henry Gassaway Davis, a United States senator who saw the spruce and hardwood forests of Canaan Valley and understood immediately what they were worth to an industrializing nation. He built a railroad into the valley, established a mill town, and spent the next 20 years stripping the mountains as efficiently as anyone had ever stripped anything in Appalachia. When the timber ran out, which it did completely because it always does, Davis tried to pivot. The mills closed, and the population crashed from several thousand to a few hundred. What the senator's fortune had built became what his extraction left behind. The town of Davis still exists in a diminished form. A few hundred people, a handful of businesses, an outfitter or two for the skiers and mountain bikers who have discovered Tucker County in recent decades. but the buildings on its main street tell the story in layers. 1890s architecture from the boom years, storefronts that have been boarded and unboarded and reboarded over the following century, a streetscape that never recovered its original density. The forests around Davis have grown back in the century since the mills closed. They look like old growth now. They are not. The stumps are still under there, 50 years of new growth above them, and if you know what you are looking for, the new forest still shows you the shape of what it replaced. Number 4. Abandoned schoolhouses of McDowell County, West Virginia. McDowell County does not have a single abandoned place. It has 100 of them, spread across a county that once held 100,000 people and now holds fewer than 19,000. At its peak in the 1950s, McDowell County produced more coal than almost any county in America. The miners built communities in every hollow, in places like Welch, Keystone, North Fork, Gary, and War, and those communities built schools because that is what people do when they intend to stay. By 2020, labor force participation in McDowell County was below 30%. The per capita income is among the lowest of any county in the country. What is left in McDowell County's hollows are the buildings those communities built and then could not take with them. 2-room schoolhouses with the desks still inside. Churches where the congregations aged out and died and nobody replaced them. Company stores that still have the original counters. Entire neighborhoods of company housing, some collapsed, some standing, the identical floor plans of cost-efficient construction repeated down a hollow for half a mile. This is not one place. It is an entire county, and the loss is ongoing. Every year, a building that has been standing since 1910 falls. Every year, the hollow gets a little quieter. Number 3. Thurmond's neighbor, Kaymoor's Coke Ovens, West Virginia. Along the south bank of the New River, between Kaymoor and several other former coal operations, there are stretches of riverbank where the coke ovens stand in rows, stone, and brick arches, maybe 4 feet tall, spaced every 8 feet along the bank line, going on for longer than makes intuitive sense. These ovens were where coal was transformed into coke, a purer carbon fuel the steel industry needed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The process involved loading raw coal into the oven, sealing it, and baking it at high temperature for 2 or 3 days. The product went to Pittsburgh, Youngstown, and Gary. The ovens went cold sometime in the mid-20th century and have not opened since. Walk the river trail past them, and the scale of what this gorge was starts to become clear. Not just one operation, but 50 of them, running simultaneously, transforming coal into coke, into steel, into the industrial infrastructure of the United States. The New River Gorge was a machine. It ran that machine for 80 years, and then it stopped. The machine is still there in the trees. The ovens hold heat longer than you would expect. On cold mornings, you can put your hand near the opening of one that has not been fired in 60 years and feel, or imagine you feel, something that is not quite warmth, but not quite cold either. Number 2. Red Ash Island, New River, West Virginia. Red Ash Island sits in the New River near the mouth of Loop Creek, and what happened here on March 6, 1900, is a story that Appalachian coal country has been quietly carrying for over 100 years. A gas explosion in the Red Ash mine killed 46 miners. They were mostly black workers and European immigrants, the populations that the New River coal companies disproportionately sent underground in the most dangerous conditions. The mine rescue was botched. The bodies were not all recovered. The company buried the incident as thoroughly as the explosion had buried the men. There is a trail marker now. The island is visible from the South Side Trail in New River Gorge National Park. The trail community, hikers, paddlers, park rangers who have worked this stretch for years, tends to stop at the marker and go quiet for a moment before continuing. The 46 men who died here are listed on that marker. For most of them, it is the only public record that they existed. Number 1, the New River Gorge itself. The New River Gorge doesn't have a single number 1. The number 1 is all of it. The gorge is 53 miles of West Virginia canyon, carved by one of the oldest rivers on the continent. Geologists believe it predates the Appalachian Mountains themselves, which means the new river was here before the mountains were, and simply kept cutting as the land rose around it. The Shawnee called it the Kaninskaha, which meant river of evil spirits. They were not wrong about the spirits, they were wrong about the evil. What the gorge contains is the record of an industrial civilization that arrived in the 1870s, extracted everything it could in 80 years, and left almost nothing behind except the ruins and the people who stayed. 49 towns, by some counts, rose and fell along these 53 miles. Thurmond, with its 14-year poker game and its 5 residents. Nuttallburg, with its Ford-era conveyor still intact. Kaymoor, with its 800 stair descent and its company scrip and its sign about working safely. Red Ash, with its 46 dead. Caperton, with its 212 coke ovens. Every mile of riverbank has something to show you if you are moving slowly enough to see it. In 2020, Congress upgraded the new River Gorge from a national river to a full national park, the first new national park in the eastern United States in decades, and the newest in the country. The outdoor recreation industry came in with the designation: the kayakers, the rock climbers, the whitewater tourists, the people who drive from Columbus and Pittsburgh on long weekends. They use the river that the miners used. They walk the paths the miners walked. They eat their lunches where the company stores used to be. Whether they know it or not, they are standing on the work that built the country that eventually stopped needing the people who built it. The gorge keeps all of that. The river doesn't explain it, it just keeps running through. Appalachia doesn't hide its ruins. It grows over them slowly and completely and waits for someone to look carefully enough. These 14 are a start. There are hundreds more.